Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are diving into a really fascinating historical and moral journey. We're going to explore a period of time that literally redrew the map of the North American continent. But don't worry, we aren't just going to sit here memorizing dates and maps. We're actually going to unpack the powerful ideas that drove those massive changes and the complex ethics behind them. Let's dive right into Manifest Destiny.
Before we throw a bunch of historical facts at you, let's establish a moral framework for our conversation. The prophet Micah asked this incredible question: what does the Lord require of you? To act justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with your God. I want you to keep this specific standard in the back of your mind as we evaluate the history we're about to jump into. When a nation makes huge, sweeping moves, how do those actions actually measure up against justice, mercy, and humility?
So here is our roadmap for today. 1. Defining manifest destiny. 2. The case for expansion. 3. The shadow of expansion. 4. Shaping public opinion. And finally, 5. Morality and true education.
All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, Defining Manifest Destiny.
So what actually is it? Manifest destiny was the claim that the United States was basically destined, like meant by a higher power, to spread all the way across the North American continent from the Atlantic to the Pacific. This wasn't just a passing thought. It was a deeply, deeply held belief. And what's really fascinating about this concept is that it was incredibly motivating for millions of people, but at the exact same time, it was wildly controversial.
Now, obviously, the desire for land existed way before this, but this specific concept really came to define the political and social climate of the 1840s. The actual phrase, manifest destiny, is usually attributed to a journalist named John L. O'Sullivan, who wrote it down in 1845. And man, the moment he gave this movement a catchy, powerful name, the idea spread like wildfire in the public imagination.
Moving right along to Section 2, the case for expansion.
So why were people so on board with this? Well, there were a few massive drivers behind the movement. First off, you had huge population growth in the East, which led to a very real hunger for new land. Second, there were immense economic hopes. People desperately wanted new markets to sell their goods and tap into new resources. Third, and this one is crucial, supporters genuinely believed they were doing the world a favor by spreading Republican institutions, meaning democracy and self-government, wherever they went. And finally, you have the explosion of new tech. Things like canals and railroads made people feel like they could actually knit these vast, newly acquired regions together into one unified country.
To put it simply, for the supporters, the core argument was this: a republic of small farmers and growing towns just needed room to breathe. To the politicians and the pioneers, a bigger nation meant safer borders, massive amounts of new farmland, and just unprecedented economic opportunity. In their eyes, expanding was a total win-win for the future of the country.
But of course, there's another side to the story. Let's look at Section 3, the shadow of expansion.
We really have to hold up the two sides of the historical mirror here. On one side, sure, supporters saw those safer borders, new farmland, and economic opportunity. But critics, they saw a completely different picture. They saw the tragic displacement of native nations, highly aggressive pressure on a neighboring republic, Mexico, and the truly terrifying spread of slavery into new territories. Thinking historically means constantly asking yourself, who benefits and who gets harmed?
Which brings us to a really critical question, one that would eventually tear the country apart. Why did expanding west suddenly intensify the debates over slavery? You might think land expansion and slavery are two totally separate issues, right? But in the 1840s, they were entirely locked together.
Here's why. Each new territory had the potential to shift the balance of power in Congress. Every single time a new piece of land was added to the U.S., it raised the same burning question: will this be a free state or a slave state? The stakes were astronomical for both sides in Washington. And let's not forget the absolute most tragic part of this whole equation. The enslaved people themselves, who were being forcibly moved into these new territories, had zero say in this so-called destiny.
Beyond the expansion of slavery, the shadow of manifest destiny carried some other really severe consequences. Expanding often meant the government was perfectly willing to break previously signed treaties. Native communities were forcibly and violently removed from their ancestral homelands, which disrupted entire cultures. On top of that, Mexico, a sovereign neighbor, faced immense political pressure that ultimately escalated into an all-out war. The grand, sweeping language of destiny was tragically used over and over to excuse choices that clearly violated justice and mercy.
This leads us right into Section 4, Shaping Public Opinion. Think about the sheer power of words for a second. How did calling this massive, aggressive expansion a destiny actually shape public opinion? Because in history and politics, framing is literally everything.
By slapping the label Manifest Destiny on the movement, it made the expansion feel totally inevitable, like a force of nature, and more importantly, highly moral. Ideas have an incredible power to justify actions. Framing this expansion as a natural, righteous act drastically lowered public resistance. It suddenly made it super easy for the government to pass funding bills, for everyday citizens to pack up their wagons and become settlers, and for the military to fight wars to secure that land.
The government and its supporters also had this massive PR campaign on their side, completely driven by art and newspapers. The media of the day was constantly spreading these glowing, majestic images of brave pioneers, covered wagons, and telegraph lines racing west to bring civilization. But as you can probably guess, those beautiful images rarely showed native families being forced from their homes or soldiers fighting bloody battles. As students of history, we always have to compare the shiny, romanticized posters with the hard facts on the ground.
Let's bring it all together in our final segment. Section 5, Morality and True Education.
I really love this concept of the historical mirror. Looking back, Manifest Destiny acts as a mirror for the 19th century United States. It clearly reflects the nation's absolute highest values, things like innovation, democracy, and a deep desire for opportunity. But at the same time, it exposes its darkest blind spots. Studying this era critically sharpens our ability to praise the real, incredible achievements while still having the courage to honestly confront the real harms.
And this ties directly into a foundational philosophy from the Hero Smart Academy. Education without morality will hurt. Honestly, what is the point of being smart, highly educated, and technologically advanced if we just use all that knowledge to make choices that hurt other people? The history of Manifest Destiny proves beyond a doubt that intelligence and ambition, when you strip away justice and mercy, can cause an immense amount of suffering.
To counter that kind of mindset, Romans 8:6-7 actually promises peace of mind to everyone who keeps their mind spiritual. Intertwining biblical morality with our education is the absolute key here. When we align our learning with a spiritual mindset, one that actually values justice, mercy, and humility, just like we talked about at the very beginning, we are empowered to make choices that are actually just. This isn't just some nice theory. It's the lived experience of people who actively engage with their learning through a moral lens.
So, as we wrap up this explainer today, I want to leave you with one final, pretty heavy question to chew on. How will you weigh national ambition against justice and rights? Whether you're looking back at the history of the 1840s or just scrolling through the news today, I really encourage you to use your education guided by a strong moral compass to ask the tough questions. Thank you so much for hanging out and exploring this fascinating topic with me today. Keep learning, keep asking questions, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.